responsibility, and the price to pay for cheating. I had an affair. I cheated on my husband 3 times before my lover, and I got careless and got caught. He didn't catch us, thank God. It would have destroyed him. Well, it would have destroyed him even more. In the end, our marriage was destroyed anyway, but at least he didn't have to see anything. No, we were caught by a coworker, someone who resented our success and didn't hesitate to throw us off our pedestal. Not that I was looking for this to happen myself. My therapist finally made me realize that nothing just happens. You make choices every day of your life, and the consequences change your life from that point forward. She taught me that a person makes choices whether they realize it or not. That's how I had my affair. I wish I could say I was drunk or on drugs, but the first time I had 3 glasses of wine the whole evening. He was very nice looking, and we had been lightly flirting with each other for almost a year. We happened to work on the same team and often did projects together. We even joked about being work spouses to our other halves when we were all together, and everyone laughed. My husband chuckled. Great. As the official work husband, I'm passing the cost of her shoe fantasy on to you. His wife got into an altercation with us. Yes, and I'm shifting the training to you to learn how to put the toilet seat down. We expect regular progress reports. We all laughed and hugged before leaving the party. On the way home, hubby told me how much he liked them and maybe we should invite them into our social circle. They had just moved here and were eager to make friends, and we subsequently spent many pleasant evenings with them and our other friends who accepted them without reservation. I won't bore you with physical descriptions, such as how big my breasts were or how well they wiggled. Oh, and what does it matter? We were young, fit, reasonably attractive, and let it stay that way. And I'm not going to talk about sex at all. My husband was the oldest, he was 30, the rest of us were in our early 20s. I had a good job, I took it right out of college and worked my way up. I was promoted several times over the years, and the old man, he was 70, who owned the company, often told me that I was the daughter he wished he had. I became a team leader, which required overnight stays on average every 2 months. I hated it, but hubby said it was no big deal. I would leave on Thursday mornings, spend the afternoon and next morning in meetings, and usually get home by 4. When I got home, we made love like we hadn't seen each other in weeks, but when it became routine, it subsided. It wasn't that we were bored with each other. We were young and enjoyed making love an average of 3 or 4 times a week. Sometimes, if we were really busy, it would come down to 1 time a week. But as soon as the opportunity arose, we would try to make up for it. We dated for 8 months and lived together for almost a year before getting married. In marriage, we were together for 3.5 years. The sex happened after a pretty intense round of meetings, and we were both pumped up. We had dinner together and shared a bottle of wine. Oddly enough, the main topic was how much we missed our spouses and some of the future activities we had planned together as a couple. A comment was made and agreed to that when we are in the state we are in now, sex with our spouses is the preferred means of release. I remember this being said, but can't remember who said it, me or him. Then we moved on to light flirting, hints and light touching. He joked that as work spouses, we had to make up for the lack of our actual spouses. Admittedly, he was handsome and always found the right words, which made him invaluable to my team. He and I kept gaining more and more momentum, but eventually went to our rooms alone. I was thinking about him, lying in bed and caressing myself, using him as food for fantasy, when there was a knock on the door. I threw on my robe and opened the door to find him standing there with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. We had no sooner finished the first glass than we were already on top of each other. Soon we were on my bed having sex. Neither of us lasted long, but we lay there, caressing and cuddling until it was time for round 2. He left me at 3 in the morning. I collapsed back into bed and fell asleep like a rock. I woke up at 7 o'clock feeling like I was suffocating, literally suffocating. I had cheated on my husband, shoved my vows into a dark corner of my mind, and tore like an animal. I showered for probably the longest time in my life. trying to wash away what I had done. He was subdued too, barely meeting my gaze during our morning meetings. We were extremely ineffective that day. We didn't even sit together on the plane home. We danced around each other for 2 weeks before he walked into my office and closed the door. We talked for 45 minutes. He apologized for hitting on me, and I apologized for accepting his offer. We agreed it would be a one-time thing, and we would take that secret to the grave. It went on like that for 6 months. We put the past behind us, I thought. I know that for about a month I was feeling as low as I could possibly feel, until hubby asked me head-on what was bothering me. After nearly fainting, I came to my senses and told him it was work-related, technically not a lie. But I had solved the problem, and it was a thing of the past. He frowned and then almost broke my heart. "I'll call X and tell him to keep an eye on you. After all, if it was his wife and I could, I'd do the same." 6 months later, Christmas came, and we were stuck in a northern town for 2 days due to one of the worst snowstorms in history. My husband and I talked several times a day, and he told me to let my working husband entertain me. He told me that he and Mrs. X were going to go to the theater together for a play that I had been looking forward to all year. He realized I was upset. "If it bothers you, we're not going. I'll give the tickets to her. Maybe her sister will go." I recovered enough to tell him it was okay, but he had to give me a big surprise next Christmas. He agreed and said he was already working on it. X and I got to talking, and he complained about how much his wife likes my husband. "She always says, 'Look how attentive he is.' It must be nice to be treated like a queen." Did I tell you about the delicate necklace he bought her just because he saw it and thought how it suited her? I unconsciously rubbed the necklace, smiling at the joy it gave me. It was a complete surprise, not a birthday, not Christmas, just because a sensual neck like yours deserves this. It will emphasize the smoothness and perfection of your skin. He wasn't perfect. He had minor imperfections that annoyed me to no end. Then I saw other couples in our group, how the women envied me and the men either admired him or were disgusted because he held the bar so high. Then I would just smile and squeeze his hand tighter. We ended up getting drunk and having sex for 2 days. We were still going at it when my hotel room called to say the airport was open and we could go home. We showered together, got on the plane together, and vowed that while we enjoyed ourselves immensely, it would never happen again. 4 months later, we were caught. I know you want to know about the sex. It was sex between 2 young, healthy adults. Yeah, it was good. Was it worth paying for? Number. Without going into too much detail, I will say that the consequences were monumental. My boss called us both in separately. When he saw me, he almost cried. "I can't tell you how disappointed I am in you. You were the best of the best. I always admired your marriage. I thought it was very similar to mine when my wife and I first started our journey together. Do you still have a husband?" I nodded, not trying to hide my tears. Yes, I was still married, even though I hadn't seen my husband in 2 weeks. Good. He was a wonderful man. I hope in his heart he forgives you. I have to protect my business and I can't be as lenient. You are still working, but your days as a team leader are over. You will never travel representing this company again, nor will you represent it publicly. Do you understand? I nodded, grateful that I still had a job. But I knew my days at his company were numbered. My star would never rise higher than it did now. Sometime later, I'd have to dust off my resume and hope he'd give me a reasonable recommendation. Things didn't go so well for X. He quietly walked away in exchange for a reasonable recommendation. I was sure it was carefully written. Mr. X has excellent communication skills, works well with others, blah, blah, blah. However, I knew that if any of my boss's friends thought about hiring him, the quiet words would pass muster, and a network of old acquaintances would come into play. I truly believed that if we talked, we would both apologize for ruining each other's lives. But we didn't. Our bosses and spouses made sure of that. My husband, from whom I never once heard him raise his voice, told X unequivocally that when he finally found him, he would wish he had killed him because from then on, his life would be miserable and painful. X believed him and left for parts unknown as soon as his divorce was finalized. He left behind a devastated wife and a 5-year-old son. I think it took her years to come to her senses. It was 8 years before she remarried to an older man who cared for her and her son. He asked his son what kind of car he would like for his 16th birthday and broke down when the boy told him that more than a car, he appreciated the use of his last name. So with the stroke of a pen, X was cut out of his son's life forever, and his new father, despite his mother's objections, bought him a top-of-the-line sports car. After leaving, X never saw his son again, though his wife tried to find him to remind him that she had divorced him, and their son had not. I found my life suddenly divided into segments, eras, if you will. There was my BTA life, before the affair, and my ATA life, after the affair. I remember that BTA was full of light and happiness, and ATA was full of grayness and despair. Thankfully, the ATA didn't last as long as the BTA. Then it was time to pick a side. Other couples in our usually tight circle had broken up, and those left behind didn't know how to feel about it. Who would we invite to barbecues, parties, and visits? Gone were the casual flirtations and hints, afraid it would bring back horrible memories for those who were still around. I was even glad when we sold the house and went our separate ways. I'm sure other couples breathed a sigh of relief, just not in front of us. The women in the circle were sympathetic to my distress, offering me support and making sure I didn't get too close to their husbands. After all, I'd already ruined one happy marriage, and it wasn't worth tempting fate. Things were even worse with X. The men were supportive of me, but also made sure that he never came close to an environment with their wives. Man and Mrs. X were much more supportive. After all, it was their own fault, right? It wasn't their fault they were in the mess their lives had become. Then I had to move on to the TTP/FF phase, telling my parents, friends, and family. I disappointed both of them, but both forgave me, even though my marriage didn't survive. I still send his parents cards at Christmas and gifts for their birthdays. They always send cards back to me, and after a few years, his parents started inviting me to visit if I came to town. I never went, but I thanked them heartily for their kindness. The first casualty of the ATA era was our personal lives. We teased, made slow and languid love like animals, depending on our moods. It took 3 weeks before hubby moved in with us, and another 6 before we tried to start a love life. It was a complete disaster. We were both terrified. He of comparisons to X and the disadvantages, me of doing something wrong and triggering horrible memories. Months went by and things got better for the most part. We were trying to pleasure each other when I felt his body just shutting down. I understood it at first, but towards the end I started to resent it. Couldn't he see how hard I was trying? How much I love him? We went to counseling and it helped. It helped us realize that it was over between us. I had broken his trust, and no matter how hard I tried to heal his heart, the wound was too great. So at the year 1.5 ATA, we were no more. The divorce wasn't contentious, just split in half. I didn't even cry when I got the final papers. We saw each other from time to time because our town wasn't very big. We always greeted each other and were polite, but that was it. I remember my heart clenched in my 4th year at ATA when I looked out the window of a cafe downtown and saw him with a woman. She was smiling, sitting next to him, giving him the touches that every woman recognizes as befitting a lover. I went home and cried my eyes out one last time. I scattered resumes all over town and got an offer from a firm 2 states away. It was a good step forward and exactly what I needed. I said goodbye to my friends, kissed my parents, and moved on. I had now entered the ATD after the divorce era. I thought about the counselor I went to for a few months after my divorce. She had really helped me. Not by sympathizing or blaming, but mostly just listening. At the penultimate session, she surprised me by taking her blouse out of her skirt and pulling it down a bit. A rather large scar was visible on the side of her thigh. She adjusted her clothes and sighed. We were young, about 16 or 17, and my friend asked her older brother to get us some booze. It was mostly liquor, so we got drunk quickly. We went deep into the woods so we wouldn't be spotted and made a fire when it got dark. It wasn't very big, and one thing led to another, and then to courage. So one boy jumped into the fire. Soon we were already encouraging each other, and we were doing well. I was jumping for the 5th time when I stumbled and fell onto the coals on my side. I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and that scar will never go away. After I got my degree, I realized that jumping off the fire was a conscious decision I made. The more often I did it, the easier it became for me, until I became careless. That scar is my price. What I'm trying to say is that you made a conscious decision to have sex with a man outside of marriage, and when nothing happened, when you realized you could get away with it, you did it again and again until you got caught. She paused briefly before continuing, repeating to herself. You did it over and over until you got careless and got caught. Do you understand? You can't explain it away by saying that everything happened by chance. Your choice to continue meant that although you jumped over the fire several times and felt safe, you eventually stumbled and fell. The scars you carry are inside you and they will never go away, but they will fade over time. The next time you have to make a choice, remember to scratch your scars. I thought about it a lot over the next week before I realized she was right. I could blame it all on X. He showed up at my door, but he didn't force me in. And everything that happened once the door closed behind him was a mutual decision. Just like the subsequent times were a simple decision on my part. And here I am. Divorced for 4 years now. I found out through relatives that hubby had found a new one. They had been married for a year and had a son. I started dating about 6 months after the divorce, but there was no spark with either of them. Admittedly, I did take one of them to bed on occasion, just to fulfill my needs. Right after the last of them left, I was lying in my bed looking back at my life and realized that I had to let go of the past if I wanted to be happy again. I got out of the bars and meat markets, joined a gym, and became involved in community activities. Once I got my strength up, I started running 5K and 10K races. I never finished in the top 10, but I made a lot of friends. One fellow runner and I got along so well that we trained together. After training, we started having coffee, then lunch, then dinner. We dated for 4 months before he let me into his bed. He was so attentive and caring that I cried after the first time. After 4 months, we were already together, and he hinted that he wanted to take things to a higher level when I told him why I was single. I wanted him to see me for who I was before and who I am now. I assured him that I had been faithful to him from the first date, that the mistakes I had made in the past were just that, mistakes. Mistakes I wasn't going to make again. I didn't know it, but he had been married before and divorced when he caught her having multiple affairs. In his mind, once a cheater, always a cheater was written in stone, and the relationship died. I grieved for a while, but then moved on with my life. The next year, I learned that God had indeed forgiven us of our sins. More importantly, I found a man who was able to forgive mine. He was 7 years older than me, but he was slim and trim. We met at a race, and we both crossed the finish line at the same time. I was so happy to have finished that I did a victory dance, lost my footing on the uneven pavement, ran into him, and we both fell. Instead of being upset, he laughed. I landed on top of him, and we were nose to nose for a minute. I tried to apologize, and he grinned. You know, if you wanted my attention, you could have smiled, maybe flirted a little. Attacking me was a little too much. However, I'll forgive you at dinner tomorrow night. I hope you like French food. He handed me a business card from his gym bag. Give me a call and let me know what time would suit you. It's a bit of an upscale establishment, so wear a nice dress. I was still trying to form coherent words when he cupped his palms around my face and kissed my cheek gently. Then he walked away. My running buddies laughed hysterically. That didn't take long, did it? If I'd known that grabbing a man would get him interested, I would have smacked that pretty boy back the first time he stopped by my place. Good girl. Did you know he's number 4 on the city's most desirable bachelor list? No? Well, good luck. The restaurant lived up to its name. He was casually but austere, must have been dressed in very expensive clothes, and his tie was pure silk. I was wearing my best dress, which I had purchased at a huge discount because the hem was torn. One of my hobbies was sewing, so I repaired the rip by cutting it out and raising the hemline a little more than an inch. I thought it emphasized my legs, and I guess I was right looking at them. The date went well, as did all the subsequent ones that followed over the course of 8 months. He was trim, attractive, and I experienced thoughts I hadn't experienced in years. It was more than attraction. It was growing into love. I hadn't felt this happy after making love since before the VTA. It broke my heart, but I was honest. He listened to me, handed me tissues, and stroked my shoulder while I cried. I tried to gauge his facial expression, and he seemed a little amused. I understand if you don't want to see me. I don't mind telling you that I've developed strong feelings for you, and that if you continue to date me and things go further, I'll sign any document, accept any prenup you offer if it means being with you. He hugged me gently. I know all about your former marriage and affair. Yes, I investigated you, invaded your privacy. Understand, I was in love with you and couldn't understand why such a beautiful and desirable woman was still single. So you made a terrible mistake. But you seem to have accepted the responsibility and the price that comes with it. And that's very important to me. He stood up, walked to his home office, and returned with a small box and a large envelope. He held out the envelope first. Read this. If you don't mind, open the box. Before asking for a pen, I reread the papers in the envelope twice. I signed in all the places indicated and handed them back to him. I had just signed a contract that said I was on a 20-year probationary period, but if I met all the requirements, it would be canceled at the end of the term. There was only one clause in the contract. I must be a faithful and devoted wife. I dropped the box on the coffee table twice before I opened it and cried as I put the ring on my finger. That's how I entered the HEA era, happy to no end. I didn't deserve it, but I learned to live with it and made sure he knew I would never let him down. I recently returned home for a high school reunion and found myself in the company of my ex and his wife. The relationship was strained at first, but it had been 15 years. We ended up having a frank conversation. I apologized one last time. He accepted them and said he had forgiven me long ago because the anger and hurt was too much to carry around. I told him that it had taken me more than a few years to forgive myself, but I had finally done it. We spent the rest of the evening talking and showing pictures of our children. We had 2, both girls, and they had 3 boys. That's the moral of the story. Sometimes good people do stupid things. Even if they didn't mean it, even if they don't get caught, it will haunt them for the rest of their lives. There will always be a voice in the back of their brain saying, "What if this is the day they find out?" I was arrogant because I truly believed in the depths of my lizard brain that if I got caught, hubby would forgive me. You can all see how well that worked out. I watch my girls like a hawk, and when they are old enough to understand, I will tell them about my past, and hopefully they will have the maturity to learn from it and forgive me. I'll also tell them the story of the scars, and that's it. My therapist was right. It feels good to get it out in the open. Thanks for reading, and if I've helped you make a decision that will stop you from creating a life-changing event, good. If not, well, that's up to you. If you decide to do it, think about how well you can bear the scars. The end. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.